"He's a good man," my son's bride, Candela, whispered to her bridesmaid just minutes before the ceremony. "But good men don't pay off a lifetime of debt." I stood frozen outside the door, an heirloom brooch in my hand. "I'll divorce him as soon as he signs over his inheritance." She thought I hadn't heard. She thought her perfect plan was underway. So I let the wedding proceed. But I made one quiet phone call to the hotel manager, a man who owed me his loyalty. I gave him a new guest. To add to the registry, a name from a past Candela believed she had buried forever. Her reckoning was about to arrive. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening from in the comments. Before that single, whispered sentence poisoned the air, the day had been a symphony of curated perfection. As a retired historian, I've always appreciated the power of a well-staged event, and my son's wedding was set to be a masterpiece. The Sterling Grand Hotel wasn't merely a venue. It was a testament to my life with Eleanor, my late wife. Every polished brass handle, every velvet drape held an echo of our story. After her passing, I used the proceeds from the sale of her cherished art collection, a move the world saw as a widower simplifying his life, to secretly become the hotel's silent majority partner, rescuing it from the brink of obscurity. It was my private monument to her, a fortress of memories disguised as a luxury establishment. Seeing my son, Augustus, standing at the altar was to see my best hopes realized. Gus is an architect, and much like the buildings he designs, he is built with integrity and an open heart. He sees the best in people, a trait he inherited from his mother, a trait that is both his greatest strength and his most profound vulnerability. And the woman standing beside him, Candela Torres, seemed to be the embodiment of everything he deserved. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was her story that had truly won me over. She spoke of a difficult upbringing in Puebla, Mexico, a narrative of struggle and resilience. She painted a picture of a young woman who had clawed her way out of poverty, armed with nothing but ambition and intelligence. It was a story that resonated with the historian in me, a chronicle of triumph against adversity. I saw in her the same fire that had burned in Eleanor, and I welcomed her into my family with an open heart. The wedding ceremony itself was flawless. Gus's vows were a pure, unscripted declaration of love, his voice thick with an emotion so genuine it felt sacred. Candela's were eloquent, poetic, and delivered with a practiced sincerity that brought tears to the eyes of our guests. When they were pronounced husband and wife, a wave of relief and joy washed over me. My son had found his happiness. My duty as a father, in that moment, felt complete. My final role in the day's formalities was a simple, cherished one: to present the bride with the sterling brooch. It was a delicate piece of Edwardian platinum and sapphire, a family heirloom passed from one sterling bride to the next. It was more than jewelry. It was a symbol of continuity, a tangible piece of our family's narrative. I had decided to give it to her just before the reception began, a quiet moment of welcome before the clamor of the celebration. With the small velvet box feeling heavy and significant in my pocket, I made my way through the hushed corridors, toward the bridal suite. The distant sound of the string quartet playing in the grand ballroom was a gentle, melodic backdrop. As I approached her door, I could hear voices from inside. It was Candela and her maid of honor, Marcella. The door was ajar, and not wanting to interrupt, I paused, my hand raised to knock. "You're shaking, Marcella?" Candela's voice drifted out, laced with an amusement that seemed odd for the occasion. "Relax, the hard part is over." Marcella's reply was a nervous whisper. "I can't help it. He's such a good person, Candela. He looks at you like you're the only thing that matters in the world. Doesn't that bother you at all?" I waited, expecting Candela to offer a loving reassurance, to speak of her own adoration for my son. Instead, A short, dry laugh echoed from the room. It was a sound entirely alien to the warm, affectionate woman I thought I knew. "Oh, Marcella, you're so wonderfully naive," she said. Her voice had shed its warmth, leaving behind a chillingly pragmatic core. "He's a good man," she conceded, as if discussing the quality of a piece of furniture. "But good men don't pay off a lifetime of debt. Good doesn't erase the past, and good certainly doesn't buy the future I am owed." My hand fell from the door. The air in the hallway turned cold, thick. The brooch in my pocket felt like a stone. "So you're really going through with it?" Marcella pressed, her voice trembling slightly. "Of course," Candela replied, her tone as sharp and final as a slammed door. "I'll play the devoted wife for 1 year, maybe 2. Long enough to get my name on the deeds, the accounts, and especially that hefty inheritance his mother left him. I will have him sign over everything. Then I will divorce him as soon as the ink is dry." I leaned against the wall, my legs suddenly unsteady. The world tilted on its axis. The woman my son had just married was not a resilient survivor. She was a predator. She wasn't finished. Vicente is not a patient man. That mess in Puebla nearly ruined me. This time I have to be smarter. Gus Sterling isn't just a husband, he's a business transaction. And I always close my deals. Vicente? Puebla. The words were keys to a past I knew nothing about, a past she had so carefully concealed behind a curtain of lies. My mind, trained to connect disparate facts, to find the patterns in the chaos of history, began to work. The shock was a physical blow, but beneath it, the analytical part of me was already taking control. This was no longer a wedding. It was a hostile takeover. And my son was the asset being acquired. I clutched the brooch in my pocket, the sharp edges of the sapphires digging into my palm. This symbol of family history, of love and trust, now felt like a mockery. To give it to her would be to participate in her deception, to bless this fraudulent union. Slowly, silently, I pushed myself off the wall. I did not run. I did not shout. I turned and walked back the way I came, my footsteps measured and deliberate. Each step carried me further from the man I was just minutes ago, the hopeful father, the proud patriarch, and closer to the man I now had to become. A historian turned strategist, a quiet academic preparing for war. The reception awaited, a ballroom full of witnesses to a lie, and I, the father of the groom, had just become the sole keeper of a devastating truth. Returning to the grand ballroom was like stepping back onto a stage after discovering the play was a tragedy. The music, the laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, it all sounded hollow, a soundtrack to a grand deception. My face, I knew, was a carefully composed mask of paternal benevolence. Years of lecturing to auditoriums of skeptical students had taught me how to command a room with stillness, how to project an aura of calm even when my mind was a whirlwind of calculations. I found my son, Gus, completely absorbed in his bride. He was orbiting her, his love so palpable it was almost a physical presence. Candela, for her part, was playing the role of a lifetime. She glowed, her laughter echoing, her hand possessively on Gus's arm. She was the perfect picture of a woman in love. But I could see it now. The historian in me, trained to look for the subtle tells, the inconsistencies in the narrative, saw the truth. Her eyes, while fixed on Gus, would occasionally dart across the room, a flicker of something that wasn't joy but assessment. She wasn't basking in the moment. She was scanning her assets. My first task was to identify the pieces on the chessboard. Vicente. The name echoed in my mind. A creditor? A former accomplice? I scanned the crowd, moving through the clusters of guests with a polite nod and a reserved smile. My eyes weren't looking for friends. They were searching for an anomaly. And then I saw him. He was standing near the towering floral arrangement by the bar, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that was just a shade too sharp for a wedding guest. He wasn't mingling. He was observing, his posture radiating a predatory stillness. He held a glass of whiskey but didn't drink from it. His eyes were fixed on Candela. There was no warmth in his gaze, only the cold, appraising look of a man calculating returns on an investment. This had to be Vicente. As I watched, Candela, under the pretense of fetching a drink for Gus, moved towards the bar. Her path was a masterclass in social navigation, a brief word here, a light laugh there. But her trajectory was unwavering. She reached the bar, and for a moment, her back was to most of the room. I saw her hand, the one not holding a champagne, flute slip a small, thick envelope from her clutch and pass it to Vicente under the cover of the bar's ledge. It was a swift, almost imperceptible exchange. A payment. A down payment on my son's future. Vicente pocketed the envelope without a change in expression and, a moment later, turned and walked coolly towards the exit, disappearing into the hotel lobby. He hadn't spoken to a single other guest. He wasn't here for the celebration. He was here to collect. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my expression remained unchanged. I now had a face to a name and a tangible action. It was time to bring in my first ally. Excusing myself from a conversation about the stock market with one of Gus's colleagues, I made my way towards the hotel's administrative wing. I didn't head for the public restrooms or the bar. I walked with the quiet authority of someone who knew the layout of the building better than the staff themselves. I found Harrison in his office, a sanctuary of calm amidst the orchestrated chaos of the event. He was reviewing staffing schedules, a pair of reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up as I entered, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Arthur, I was hoping I'd get a chance to see you. I saw your name on the guest list and wondered when you'd make an appearance. How are you holding up? It's a beautiful wedding. Your son is a lucky man." I closed the door behind me, the sound of the latch clicking into place, feeling final and significant. "No, Harrison," I said, my voice low and devoid of any social pleasantry. "My son is not a lucky man. He's a mark. He just married a professional. Grifter in my ballroom, and I need your help." The smile vanished from Harrison's face. He took off his glasses and gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Tell me everything." I recounted the confession I'd overheard, the cold, pragmatic words that had laid her plan bare. I described the man at the bar, the envelope, the silent departure. As I spoke, Harrison's expression shifted from concern to a steely resolve. He had been my friend for over 30 years. He had been there when Eleanor and I first waltzed in the ballroom, and he had been a pillar of support after she was gone. He was a man of unimpeachable integrity, and his loyalty to me and to the memory of my wife was absolute. "So that's why you stepped in," he said quietly, connecting the dots. "When the hotel was struggling 3 years ago. It wasn't just a sound investment for you, was it? It was about preserving this place. It was about preserving our history," I corrected gently. "And now, I need to use this place to prevent my son's future from being destroyed. The entire stage is mine, Harrison. I just need a stage manager." A grim smile touched Harrison's lips. "Consider me at your service. What's the first act?" "The guest," I said. "The man Candela gave the envelope to. He just left. His name is likely Vicente. I need to know everything about him. I need his full name, what room he was in if he was a registered guest, and I need access to all security footage of him from the moment he set foot in this hotel." Harrison was already turning to his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Security is my domain, Arthur. If he breathed in this hotel, I have a record of it." "And what about the bride?" "For now, I watch her," I said. "I need to understand her methods, her psychology. A historian never rushes into battle without first studying the enemy's campaigns. Give me a feed to all the public area cameras, the ballroom, the lobby, the hallways, on a private monitor. I want to see every interaction, every nervous glance. Harrison nodded, his focus absolute. I have a security annex just down the hall. We can set it up there. No one will disturb you. One more thing, I said, the next piece of my plan clicking into place. I need to make a call, a former student of mine. He was the most tenacious researcher I ever taught. Now he's one of the country's top investigative journalists. I have a name, Candela Torres, and a place, Puebla. I need him to dig. I need to know what mess she left behind there. As I walked with Harrison to the security annex, a hidden nerve center of monitors and controls, I felt the grief and shock begin to recede, replaced by a cold, energizing focus. This was familiar territory. Sifting through evidence, connecting. Timelines uncovering the hidden narratives beneath the official story. Candela thought she was a master of deception. She had no idea she had just declared war on a historian in his own library, surrounded by all his books. The security annex was a world away from the gilded elegance of the ballroom. Here, the only light came from the cool blue glow of 24 monitors, each displaying a silent high-definition feed of the celebration. It was a historian's dream, a primary source document of an unfolding event, captured from every conceivable angle. Harrison left me with a fresh pot of coffee and a secure phone line, his parting words a quiet promise. The house is yours, Arthur. Tell me what walls to move. Alone in the silent, flickering room, I became a ghost at my son's wedding. I watched Candela work the room, a maestro of social graces. I saw her charm Gus's uncle, a notoriously shrewd businessman with a seemingly encyclopedic knowledge of his company's latest stock performance. I saw her console Gus's cousin, who was going through a difficult divorce, with a performance of empathy so convincing it was almost beautiful. She was a chameleon, adapting her colors and patterns to suit whomever she was targeting. She wasn't just a grifter, she was an artist of manipulation. My phone buzzed. It was David, my former student. His text was brief, characteristic of a journalist, who lived by the economy of words, on it. Puebla and Torres. Sounds familiar. Give me a few hours. While I waited, Harrison's team delivered. An image of Vicente appeared on the main screen, a crisp, clear shot from the lobby camera as he checked in the day before. The name on the registration, Vicente Morales. The address was a P.O. box in Miami. He had paid in cash for one night, in a standard room, not the lavish suite of a wealthy wedding guest. He was here on business, and his business was Candela. The footage showed him entering the hotel, going straight to his room, and not emerging until just before the wedding reception. He had met no one. He had spoken to no one except the front desk clerk. And after receiving the envelope from Candela, he had checked out and taken a taxi directly to the airport. He was a courier, a collector, a ghost. I watched the footage of the envelope exchange again, this time zooming in. It was thick, a standard bank envelope, bulging with what could only be cash, the first payment on her investment in my son. This was the seed money for her operation. Where had it come from? I scanned the list of wedding expenses again. Everything was paid for by my accounts. The flowers, the catering, the music, everything, except for one item, the wedding dress. She had insisted on paying for that herself, a gesture she framed as a symbol of her independence. The boutique was one of the most exclusive in the city. The dress, I knew, cost a small fortune. She hadn't paid for it with her own money. She had paid for it with Vicente's. It was a loan, an advance on her future earnings. She was literally wearing her debt down the aisle. The thought was so grotesque it almost made me laugh. This entire wedding, this flawless performance was leveraged. She was betting everything on my son's inheritance, and Vicente was her underwriter. Her desperation was her greatest weakness. A historian knows that empires built on debt are the most fragile of all. They are prone to overreach, to taking risks that stable powers would avoid. She needed money, and she needed it fast. My phone buzzed again. It was David. "Call me. Secure line." I picked up the dedicated phone Harrison had provided. "David, what? Have you found?" David's voice was tense, excited. "Arthur, this is bigger than you think. Candela Torres isn't her real name, or at least it's not the only one she's used. 2 years ago in Puebla, a woman named Sofia Reyes married into the wealthy Del Rio family. She was beautiful, charming, and had a tragic backstory about escaping poverty. Sound familiar?" "Go on," I said, my grip tightening on the receiver. 6 months into the marriage, the patriarch Ricardo Del Rio suffered a sudden health crisis. Sofia, armed with a freshly signed power of attorney, began liquidating assets. By the time the family realized what was happening, millions were gone. Sofia Reyes vanished. The local authorities suspected foul play in Ricardo's death, but the investigation stalled. No body, no evidence, and the main enforcer for the local loan sharks who had backed her, the man who was seen collecting payments from her before she disappeared. His name was Vicente Morales. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't her first campaign. Puebla was her last one. A dress rehearsal for the main event in my ballroom. She hadn't failed. She had just been forced to flee before she could collect the final payout. My son wasn't her golden ticket. He was her second attempt. "Thank you, David," I said, my voice steady despite the rage coiling in my gut. "You've given me exactly what I need. Send me everything you have encrypted." After I hung up, I sat in the darkness, the faces of my son and his new wife flickering on the monitors. She was now dancing with him, her head resting on his shoulder, a picture of blissful love. But I saw the truth. I saw Sofia Reyes. I saw a predator swaying with her prey. My anger was a white-hot furnace, but I contained it. A historian's revenge is not a fiery explosion. It is a meticulously documented thesis. It was time to set the trap, and I would bait it with the one thing she couldn't resist, the promise of a shortcut. I called Harrison. "It's time, my friend. I need you to play a role." "Whatever you need, Arthur." "There is a moment after the cake is cut, before the dancing becomes less formal. I want you to approach Candela. You are the esteemed manager of the Sterling Grand. You are going to tell her that you are incredibly impressed by her poise and business acumen. You are going to mention that one of the hotel's most important and reclusive investors has been watching the event from his private suite and has been equally impressed." Harrison was silent for a moment, understanding dawning in his voice. "And this reclusive investor is you." "Precisely," I said. "This investor, you will tell her, is looking to partner on a high-yield, short-term real estate venture. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but it's time-sensitive. He requires a significant cash buy-in to secure a position, and the decision must be made tonight. You're going to use her greed against her," Harrison said, a note of admiration in his voice. "I'm going to present her with a dilemma," I corrected. "She can stick to her slow 2-year plan with Gus, or she can try to accelerate her earnings, pay off Vicente, and be free and clear in a single night. A gambler who is deep in debt will always bet on the next hand. It's human nature. It's history." "What's the buy-in?" Harrison asked. I looked at the monitor, at the diamond bracelet sparkling on her wrist, at the designer shoes peeking from under her gown. I thought of the cash in the envelope. "Make it substantial," I said. "Make it just enough that it would require every cent she has, and perhaps a little more. Let's see how resourceful she can be when she thinks no one is watching." The trap was set. The bait was dangling. All I had to do now was wait for the predator to walk into the historian's library. From my silent perch in the security annex, I watched the next phase of the wedding reception unfold. The cake, A towering confection of white frosting and delicate sugar flowers was wheeled into the center of the ballroom. Gus and Candela stood side by side, his arm securely around her, their hands joined on the silver knife. The flashbulbs popped, capturing a moment of manufactured joy. They fed each other a piece of cake, their smiles wide for the cameras. To the untrained eye, they were the perfect couple. To me, every gesture was a line in a historical text I was now deconstructing. This was my cue. On the monitor, I saw Harrison emerge from the administrative wing, his posture embodying the quiet authority of a man in complete control of his domain. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his path intersecting with the bride and groom just as they finished their photo opportunities. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling," he said, his voice a warm, congratulatory baritone that I could hear faintly through the audio feed. An absolutely magnificent celebration, one of the finest I've had the pleasure of hosting. Gus beamed. "Thank you, Harrison. It's perfect. Everything is perfect." "Indeed," Harrison said, his eyes shifting subtly to Candela. "Mrs. Sterling, if I may have a brief word? Your husband is being pulled away by his uncle, and there is a small matter I hope to discuss." Candela, ever the gracious hostess, inclined her head. "Of course, Mr. Harrison. Is everything all right?" "More than all right," Harrison said, lowering his voice to a confidential tone, drawing her slightly away from the flow of guests. This was the moment. I leaned closer to the monitor, my focus absolute. "I hope you'll forgive the intrusion on such a special night," Harrison began, his tone a masterful blend of deference and business. "But an opportunity has arisen that is remarkably time-sensitive. One of our hotel's principal partners, a very private and influential investor, has been observing tonight's event from his suite. He is a man who values discretion and results above all else." I saw a flicker of interest in Candela's eyes. The word investor was a lure she couldn't ignore. "He has been extraordinarily impressed," Harrison continued, "not just by the elegance of the wedding, but by you, Mrs. Sterling. He remarked on your poise, your clear intelligence, and your ability to command a room. He believes you have a rare talent for strategic partnerships." The flattery was perfectly calibrated. It didn't just appeal to her vanity, it appealed to her ego as a skilled operator. It told her that a fellow predator had recognized her abilities. I'm flattered," Candela said, her voice a mixture of surprise and carefully concealed eagerness. "But I'm not sure what this has to do with me." "Ordinarily, it would be nothing," Harrison said, leaning in slightly. "But he has authorized me to approach you. He is finalizing a major real estate acquisition, a distressed luxury resort property. The deal closes in the morning, and a last-minute position has opened for a silent partner. The projected return is astronomical. He believes you would be a perfect fit for this venture." I watched her face on the monitor. Her mask of bridal bliss was still in place, but behind it, I could almost see the gears of her mind spinning, calculating, assessing. This was the shortcut she had been dreaming of. A way to bypass the slow 2-year process of bleeding my son dry. "An investment?" she asked, her voice now a careful professional whisper. "Tonight?" "That is the complication," Harrison said with a sigh of feigned regret. "The buy-in is substantial. $250,000, and the wire transfer must be initiated before the banks close in Zurich, which is in less than 3 hours. It's an aggressive timeline, I know. He only extends these opportunities to individuals he believes can act decisively. The number was a calculated risk. It was high enough to be alluringly exclusive, and high enough that I knew it would require more than the cash she'd just received from Vicente. It would force her to become reckless." Candela's mask flickered. For a split second, I saw a flash of raw, naked greed, so intense it was almost startling. Then it was gone, replaced by a thoughtful, composed expression. "That is A very significant sum, Mr. Harrison, she said, testing the waters. I would need more information, of course. A prospectus, financial projections? Naturally, Harrison replied smoothly, already anticipating the move. He has prepared a preliminary portfolio. He suggested a brief, discreet meeting to discuss. The details. Perhaps in the hotel library in, say, 1 hour? It would give you time to consider the proposition. She hesitated for only a moment. The lure of a quick, massive score, the chance to pay off her debts and secure her future in a single move, was too powerful to resist. To a gambler like her, this wasn't a risk. It was a destiny. Yes, she said, her voice firm. 1 hour, the library. I will be there. Excellent, Harrison said with a small, respectful nod. I will inform him. And Mrs. Sterling, congratulations again on your marriage. He turned and melted back into the crowd, his mission accomplished. Candela stood, alone for a moment, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. She thought she was on the verge of the biggest score of her life. She thought she was outsmarting everyone in the room. She had no idea that the reclusive, brilliant investor she was about to meet was the same old man she had so casually dismissed. The historian was waiting in his library, and the final chapter of her story was about to be written. While Candela navigated her own reception, a predator cloaked as a bride, I was orchestrating the final act from the quiet sanctum of the security annex. The next hour was critical. My plan required more than just confronting her. It required irrefutable, multi-layered evidence. The kind of evidence a historian presents to silence all debate. First, the library. It wasn't just a meeting room. It was my chosen courtroom. I called Harrison. The library, my friend. I need it prepared. No flowers, no champagne, just the large mahogany table, my armchair at the head, and one other chair opposite. I want the lighting to be focused, intimate, like a confession booth. I watched her hands, which were clasped tightly on the table. Her knuckles were white. She was a master of controlling her expression, but the body rarely lies so well. She laughed, a short, brittle sound that didn't belong in this quiet room. Arthur, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Perhaps you've had a bit too much champagne. This is my wedding night. Indeed it is, I said. I picked up the first document, the Puebla marriage certificate, and slid it across the polished surface of the table. It came to a stop directly in front of her. Your first wedding night, you mean? She glanced down at the paper, her eyes widening almost imperceptibly as she saw the names, Sofia Reyes and Javier del Rio. She looked back up at me, her face a pale, frozen mask. The game was over, and she knew it. The only thing left was to see how she would play the final hand. This is ridiculous, she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. This is slander. Gus will never believe you. You're just a bitter old man, jealous of his son's happiness. Perhaps, I said. I slid the next document across the table. The bank. Statements with the large, damning withdrawals highlighted in yellow. But banks are rarely jealous, Candela. They are simply factual, just as newspapers are. I added the clipping about Ricardo del Rio's death to the growing pile in front of her. Her composure finally broke. A tremor of genuine fear ran through her. She pushed back her chair, ready to flee. I wouldn't do that if I were you, I said, my voice still quiet, but now carrying the full weight of my authority. Because this conversation is far from over, and we have an audience. With a small, discreet remote in my hand, I pressed a single button. From behind her, there was a soft, whirring sound. The grand, gilded painting of the clipper ship above the fireplace began to rise, revealing not a hidden safe, but a large, dark screen. A moment later, the screen flickered to life. The screen behind Candela glowed to life, bathing the dark library in a cold, artificial light. It revealed the interior of the East Conference Room, My son, Gus, sat at a long table, his expression a mixture of confusion and mild impatience. Beside him were my brother Robert and his wife, their faces etched with concern. And across from them, Candela's own family, her mother, father, and brother, looked equally bewildered. They were all there, a captive audience to a play they didn't know they were a part of. Candela stared at the screen, her back to me, but I could see the rigid set of her shoulders, the way her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She turned her head slowly, her face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. She looked from the image of her family on the screen to the pile of documents on the table and finally to me. The color drained from her face, leaving her skin the color of old parchment. "What? What is this?" she stammered, the last vestiges of her composure crumbling into dust. "This, Candela," I said, my voice resonating in the hushed room, "is what historians call a primary source, an eyewitness account. I thought it best that the people whose lives you intended to ruin hear the truth directly. No hearsay. No he said, she said, just this room and your choices." On the screen, I saw Gus lean forward, his eyes locked on the scene unfolding in the library. He could see his new wife, he could see me, and he could hear every word we said through a hidden microphone. The confusion on his face was beginning to curdle into a terrible, dawning comprehension. Candela's mind, quick and venomous even in defeat, went for the only weapon she had left. "You're lying!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He's manipulating you all. Gus, darling, can't you see? This is what he does. He's a controlling old man who can't stand to see you happy." She was playing to her audience, a desperate last-ditch performance. But her stage was no longer the grand ballroom. It was this stark, unforgiving library, and her props were a stack of irrefutable facts. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply spoke to the room, knowing my words were being carried next door. Is it controlling, Gus, to uncover a history of fraud? Is it controlling to learn that your bride's real name is Sophia Reyes and that she is wanted for questioning? In connection with the suspicious death of her last father-in-law? A collective gasp went through the conference room, audible even through the microphone. I saw Candela's mother press a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Gus looked as if he had been physically struck, his body recoiling in his. "Chair, he's making it up," Candela screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "There's no proof." "Isn't there?" I asked calmly. I picked up the final document, the one I had saved for last. It was a sworn affidavit from a man in Puebla, a former associate of Vicente Morales, whom David's contacts had managed to locate. It detailed, in stark and brutal language, the entire Del Rio scheme. I slid it across the table. "This arrived by courier an hour ago. It has been sent to the district attorney's office. It seems your old partner, Vicente, left a few loose ends. It turns out loyalty is not a commodity one can purchase from men like him." She stared at the affidavit, her chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. She was trapped, cornered by a past she thought she had buried. The intricate web of lies she had spent years weaving was unraveling thread by thread in the cold, clear light of this room. On the screen, Gus slowly stood up. His face was a canvas of agony. He looked at the image of the woman he had just married, a stranger with a hidden name and a monstrous past. And then he looked, through the camera's lens, directly at me. His eyes weren't angry. They were filled with a profound, soul-crushing sadness. "Candela," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of a final judgment. "Is it true?" His simple, heartbroken question did what my evidence, my accusations, and my planning could not. It shattered the last of her defenses. All the fight, all the venom, all the practiced manipulation drained out of her. She sank back into her chair, a broken doll in a white dress, and covered her face with her hands. A choked, guttural sob escaped her lips. It was the first honest sound I had heard her make all day. In the conference room, her father stood up and turned his back, unable to look at the screen any longer. Her mother was openly weeping. My son, Gus, simply stood there, a statue of grief, as the perfect picture of his life was irrevocably burned to the ground. The historian in me observed the scene dispassionately. An empire of lies, brought down not by an army, but by a single well-placed truth. But the father in me ached for the collateral damage, for the good man who had been caught in the crossfire. The confrontation was over. The verdict was in. All that remained was the sentencing, and I would be the one to deliver it. The sound of Candela's sobbing was the only noise in the library. It was a raw, ugly sound, stripped of all artifice. On the screen, the conference room was a tableau of silent shock. My work here was nearly done. All that remained was to formalize the victory and begin the long, painful process of healing. I stood up, the leather of my armchair groaning softly in the quiet. I walked around the table and stood before her, not as a gloating victor, but as a judge delivering a final, irrevocable sentence. "There are two paths forward from this room, Candela," I said, my voice measured and devoid of emotion. "You will choose one of them. Tonight." She looked up, her face streaked with mascara, her eyes wild with a mixture of terror and hatred. "You've ruined me," she whispered. "No," I corrected her gently. "Your past has caught up with you. I merely provided the transportation." I placed two documents on the table in front of her, alongside a fountain pen from my own pocket. "Path number 1, I continued. "This is a legally binding annulment petition, citing fraud as the grounds. You will sign it. This second document is a full confession and a waiver of any and all claims to the Sterling family assets, including the return of all gifts exceeding a value of $1,000. You will sign that as well. You will then walk out of this hotel, disappear from my son's life, and never contact any member of my family again. If you choose this path, the evidence of your activities in Puebla, the affidavit, the bank records, they will remain a private family matter sealed in my vault. I will have my justice and you will have your freedom. A chance to start again, somewhere far from here, without the shadow of a prison sentence." Her eyes darted from the papers to my face, a flicker of calculation returning. She was already weighing the odds. "And path number 2? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Path number 2 is simpler," I said. "You refuse to sign, and this entire dossier," I tapped the pile of evidence with my finger, "along with a high-definition video recording of this entire meeting, will be hand-delivered to the district attorney's office by my attorney at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. We will pursue charges not only for the fraud committed against my son, but we will also cooperate fully with the Mexican authorities regarding their investigation into the financial crimes and the death of Ricardo Del Rio. You will spend the best years of your life in a courtroom, and likely the rest of them in a cell. The choice is yours, Sophia." I slid the pen towards her. The weight of her future, of her very freedom, was contained in that single, elegant instrument. For a long moment, she just stared at it. I could see the war raging within her, the pride, the fury, the sheer animal instinct for survival. But the historian knows that even the most ruthless empress will bend the knee when faced with certain annihilation. With a trembling hand, she reached for the pen. She didn't read the documents. She knew what they said. She signed her name, Candela Torres, on the annulment. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she signed the confession with the same name. It was her final, futile act of defiance, refusing to acknowledge the ghost of Sofia Reyes. When she was done, she threw the pen down on the table. "Are you happy now?" She spat, her voice thick with venom. "You've won." "This was never about winning," I said, collecting the signed papers. "It was about truth. I turned to the screen where my son was still standing, watching, his face a mask of grief. "Harrison," I said, speaking to the hidden microphone, "please escort Ms. Torres from the premises. Ensure she collects her personal belongings and nothing else. Her access to this hotel is now permanently revoked." I pressed the remote again and the screen went black. The painting of the clipper ship silently descended, hiding the conference room from view, sealing the two worlds from each other. Once more, Candela stood up, her white dress a cruel mockery in the somber room. Two of Harrison's plain-clothed security guards entered the library. They didn't touch her, but their presence was an unyielding wall. She gave me one last look, a look of pure, undiluted hatred. Then, without another word, she turned and walked. Out of the library and out of our lives. I stood in the silence, the signed documents heavy in my hand. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving behind a profound exhaustion and a deep, aching sorrow for my son. The library doors opened again. It was Gus. He walked in slowly, his steps unsteady, as if he were traversing the deck of a storm-tossed ship. He didn't look at the empty chair where his wife had sat. He didn't look at the pile of evidence. He just looked at me. "All of it?" he asked, his voice raw. "All of it was a lie?" "I'm so sorry, son," I said, and the words felt utterly inadequate. He walked to the fireplace and braced himself against the mantel, his shoulders shaking. "I loved her, Dad. I really, truly loved the person I thought she was." "I know you did," I said softly, coming to stand beside him. He turned to face me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "That man, Vicente, the money from Puebla. You knew all of this, and you let the wedding happen. Why? Why would you let me go through with it?" It was the question I had been dreading, the one I knew I had to answer with the complete, unvarnished truth. It was the final, most important part of the lesson. Standing before my heartbroken son in the quiet solemnity of the library, I knew my answer to his question. Why did you let it happen? Would define our relationship for the rest of our lives. I could have offered a simple platitude, a comforting lie, but he deserved more than that. He deserved the historian's unvarnished truth. Because Gus, I began, my voice steady, if I had stopped the wedding, if I had simply presented you with this evidence before the ceremony, what would you have done? I let the question hang in the air. You would have confronted her, and she, I gestured to the empty chair, is a master of manipulation. She would have cried. She would have spun a story of being framed, of a tragic misunderstanding. She would have painted me as a jealous, controlling father trying to sabotage your happiness. And you, with your good and trusting heart, you would have wanted to believe her. It would have planted a seed of doubt, a poison between us that might have never been purged. Gus stared into the cold fireplace, the truth of my words settling. Upon him, like a heavy cloak, I had to let her play her final hand, I continued. I had to let her walk onto a stage she believed was hers, under lights she didn't know I controlled. The only way to truly defeat a lie of that magnitude was to let it expose itself. The only way for you to see the truth without a shadow of a doubt was for you to witness her greed firsthand, to hear her condemn herself with her own words. It was a terrible choice, son. To save your future, I had to allow your present to be shattered, and for that, I am truly sorry. He was silent. For a long time, the only sound the distant, muffled pulse of the music from a party that no longer had a reason to celebrate. Finally, he nodded, a slow, heavy gesture of acceptance. She would have convinced me, he whispered, his voice thick with self-recrimination. God help me. She would have convinced me you were the villain. It's not your fault you trust people. Gus, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. You got that from your mother. It's a gift. You just need to learn to build stronger vaults to protect it. He finally looked at me, the raw pain in his eyes beginning to be replaced by a glimmer of understanding. "The hotel," Harrison told me. "You own it. All this time." "Your mother and I built our life in this place," I said softly. "After she was gone, I couldn't bear to let it fall into the hands of strangers who only saw it as an asset on a balance sheet. So yes, I bought it, to protect her memory, and tonight, it seems, to protect her son." We stood there in silence for another moment, father and son, two survivors on the shore of a shipwrecked dream. The grief was immense, but for the first time in months, there were no more lies between us. The aftermath was quiet and methodical. The annulment was processed swiftly. Candela, true to her word, disappeared. The briefcase of cash she had received from Vicente was confiscated by Harrison as unclaimed property and anonymously donated to a local women's shelter. A small act of poetic justice. Vicente Morales, upon learning his investment had vanished along with his operative, wisely chose not to pursue the matter with the Sterling family. Men like him thrive in the shadows. The light I had shown was too bright for them. "And the technology?" Harrison's voice was already anticipating my needs. "The large painting of the clipper ship above the fireplace," I instructed. "Behind it, I need a high-definition monitor, patched directly into a live feed from a camera in the adjacent conference room. Make it seamless, Harrison. I want the reveal to be theatrical." "Consider it done, Arthur." "What about your son?" That was the most painful part of the equation. "Gus needs to be there, but he cannot know what he is about to see. After the speeches, I need you to invent a reason to bring him to the conference room. A last-minute wedding gift delivery that needs his signature, a minor issue with the hotel bill, anything. And he cannot be alone. I want my brother, Robert, and his wife with him. I need steady, supportive hands when the truth comes out." "And her family?" Harrison asked. "Them too," I said, a grim necessity. "Her parents, her brother, bring them to the conference room under the same pretext. She has painted a picture of herself as their savior, the daughter who escaped poverty to rescue them. It is only right that they see the true portrait." While Harrison's team moved with quiet efficiency, my own investigation continued. The encrypted file from David arrived, a dossier of deceit. It was a chronicle of the Puebla affair, complete, with bank records showing large, unexplained cash withdrawals from the Del Rio family accounts, followed by wire transfers to offshore entities. There were newspaper clippings of Ricardo Del Rio's sudden death, officially ruled a heart attack, but privately questioned by the local constabulary. And most damningly, there was a copy of a notarized marriage certificate between Sofia Reyes and Javier Del Rio, and a second document, a request for legal separation filed just a week before Ricardo's death, citing irreconcilable differences. She had been setting up her exit strategy even then. I printed every page, the hum of the printer a quiet counterpoint to the distant music from the ballroom. I arranged the documents on the library table, a timeline of her crimes laid out in black and white. Meanwhile, on the monitors, I watched Candela's own frantic preparations. Her greed had made her careless. She pulled Gus aside, her hand on his chest, her eyes wide with manufactured excitement. "Darling, a most incredible opportunity has come up. A surprise for our future. I need to make a quick financial transfer, but my banking app is being difficult. Could I possibly use yours for a moment?" My son, my dear, trusting Gus, didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone, unlocked it, and handed it to her. I watched as she quickly navigated to his banking app. She was trying to transfer a large sum from his personal savings, a fund I knew he had been building for a down payment on a house. But the amount she needed exceeded his daily transfer limit. I saw the flash of frustration on her face. She needed more, and she needed it now. She excused herself, claiming a headache, and moved swiftly to a quiet alcove. She pulled out her own phone, and I zoomed in on the screen. She was texting Vicente. The message was clear. Deal changed. Need another 100,000. Tonight. High return. Meet me back of service entrance in 20. She was double dipping. She was going to take a larger loan from her handler, using the promise of this new fake investment as collateral, all while trying to drain my son's savings. The audacity was breathtaking. 20 minutes later, the service entrance camera showed Vicente Morales returning, his face a mask of grim annoyance. The exchange was tense. He handed her a briefcase, not an envelope this time, a full briefcase. She, in turn, handed him what looked like a piece of jewelry, the diamond earrings Gus had given her as a wedding present. Collateral. She was literally selling off parts of her new life to fund the destruction of it. With the briefcase in hand, she returned to the reception, her composure restored. She found Marcella, her nervous bridesmaid, and pulled her into the powder room. The camera in the hallway outside captured their muffled but intense conversation. "You have to do this for me, Marcella." Candela's voice was a sharp hiss. "Take this briefcase to the front desk. Tell them it's for the hotel's safe. Get a receipt. Do not ask questions." Marcella looked terrified, but she took the briefcase. She was a pawn in Candela's game, a reluctant accomplice trapped by a toxic friendship. Candela had the money. She had drained my son, leveraged her handler, and implicated her best friend. She had assembled her buy-in for a deal that didn't exist. She walked out of the powder room, smoothed her dress, and checked her reflection, a triumphant smile on her face. She was ready for her midnight meeting, in the library. She was ready to close the deal of a lifetime. She had no idea she was walking into a history lesson from which there would be no escape. The library of the Sterling Grand was my favorite room in the entire hotel. It was a sanctuary of quiet dignity, paneled in dark mahogany and lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound classics. A grand fireplace, cold and dark for the warm spring evening, dominated one wall. It was a room that smelled of old paper, beeswax, and the weight of accumulated knowledge. It was a room that demanded honesty. Tonight, it would serve as my courtroom. I arrived 10 minutes before the appointed hour, the dossier from David clutched in my hand. I walked past the shelves, my fingers trailing over the spines of books Eleanor and I had chosen together. Histories, biographies, novels about empires rising and falling. The irony was not lost on me. I took my seat in the large, wing-backed leather armchair at the head of the long mahogany table, a position that afforded me a commanding view of the entire room, and waited. The documents were arranged before me, not in a haphazard pile, but in a deliberate chronological order. The Puebla marriage certificate, the bank statements showing the systematic draining of the Del Rio family funds, the newspaper clippings about Ricardo Del Rio's convenient death, the notarized request for separation. I placed them like stepping stones, a path leading from her, passed directly to this room. On the monitor in the security annex, I had watched Harrison execute his final moves with flawless precision. He had approached Gus, feigning concern. "Augustus, my apologies, but we have a slight discrepancy with the floral invoice. It's a minor thing, but it requires your signature to resolve. Could you spare me 5 minutes in the East Conference Room?" My trusting son, ever eager to be helpful, had followed without question. Harrison had then gathered Candela's parents and brother with a similar plausible excuse about confirming guest accommodations. They were all now seated in the conference room next door, believing they were waiting for a routine administrative chat. The stage was set. The audience was in place, hidden behind a one-way mirror disguised as a painting. At precisely midnight, the library doors opened. Candela entered, a vision in white. She had removed her veil, and her dark hair was swept up in an elegant chignon. She carried a small alligator skin clutch, and her movements were imbued with the confident grace of a CEO about to close a 9-figure deal. She was no longer a bride. She was a predator who had scented a kill. Her eyes scanned the room, expecting to see a wealthy, reclusive investor. Instead, she saw me. For a moment, she faltered. A flicker of confusion, perhaps even alarm, crossed her features. But she recovered instantly, her professional mask snapping back into place. Her surprise melted into a warm, almost familial smile. "Arthur," she said, her voice a silken purr. "What a surprise. I was told I was meeting with one of the hotel's partners." "You were," I replied, my voice calm and even. I did not stand. I did not offer her a seat. I let her stand in the center of the room, a solitary figure in a sea of silent books. "Please, have a seat, Candela, or should I call you Sophia?" The name hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp. Her smile didn't vanish, but it tightened, at the edges. The warmth in her eyes was extinguished, replaced by a cold, watchful wariness. She slowly moved to the chair opposite me and sat down, her posture ramrod straight. "I'm afraid I don't know anyone by that name," she said, her voice losing its purr, becoming flatter, more guarded. "Don't you?" I asked, my tone conversational, as if we were discussing a minor point of historical debate. "Sofia Reyes, of Puebla. Married into the Del Rio family 2 years ago. A very tragic story. Her father-in-law passed away so suddenly. Weeks turned into a month. Gus moved back into my home, into his childhood bedroom. He was quiet, withdrawn, processing the magnitude of the betrayal. We didn't talk much about Candela. Instead, we talked about architecture, about history, about his mother. We fell back into the easy, comfortable rhythm of our lives before she had entered it. We were healing. One evening, about 2 months after the wedding that wasn't, I found him in the library, sketching in a notepad. He was redesigning the garden courtyard. "It needs more light," he said, not looking up, "and a better flow. Mom would have wanted it to feel more open." "She would have," I agreed. He put his pencil down and finally looked at me. "I'm ready to come back to work, Dad. I've been adrift. I need to build something again." "I know," I said. "And I have a project. For you." I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a set of old rolled-up blueprints and a single heavy brass key. I spread the blueprints on the table. They were the original plans for the Sterling Grand Hotel, yellowed with age, covered in my own, father's architectural notes. "I've been the caretaker of this place for long enough, Gus," I said, pushing the key across the polished wood towards him. "I'm a historian. I preserve things. But you are an architect. You build them. You make them new again." He stared at the key, then at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Dad, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm retiring for good this time," I said with a smile. "I'm turning the hotel over to you. It's yours. The whole thing. I had intended to give you and her a generous wedding gift from the proceeds. But I've decided this is a much better one. It's not just money, son. It's a legacy." Tears welled in his eyes, but this time, they were not tears of grief. He stood up and walked around the table, and for the first time since he was a small boy, he wrapped his arms around me in a fierce, thankful hug. "I won't let you down, Dad," he whispered. "You never have," I replied, my own voice thick with emotion. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about restoration. It's about clearing away the debris of a lie to reveal the solid foundation that was there all along. My son is building again, not just with brick and mortar, but with the quiet confidence of a man who understands the value of a true and honest design. He is becoming the steward of our family's history, a legacy passed not through a fraudulent contract, but through a bond of trust, rebuilt and reinforced. As for me, my work as a warrior is done. I have returned to my quiet life as a historian, a father, and now a full-time grandfather. The greatest revenge I've learned is not to destroy your enemy. It is to build a future so strong and so true that their memory becomes nothing more than a footnote in a history they were never meant to be a part of. And that is a legacy worth protecting. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you found this story of justice and legacy meaningful, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. And I'd love to read your thoughts, so please share your impressions in the comments below. Until next time, remember that the strongest foundations are always built on truth.